I want to thank Concordia for sharing their powerful platform and stage to shed light on such a noble American cause, changing the narrative and circumstances for young boys and men of color. The beginning of my life story, if told in more detail, would sound identical to many of our boys and young men of color who are growing up in the Bronx today. Every day, these young men have to circumvent, dodge, and make life-changing decisions on joining gangs, drugs, using them or selling them, teen pregnancy, abusive relationships, domestic violence, altercations with police, just to name a few. The systemic realities of boys and young men of color, the things that they face, is a disgrace to our nation's creed. A united effort is the only way to change this narrative, and we all must step up. Today, Concordia, partnering with My Brother's Keeper Alliance, serve as an example of how we can convene and truly address these systemic issues and outcomes for our young men of color.
So good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to focus our panel discussion today really on the opportunity. The opportunity has been categorized as a $2.1 trillion market opportunity that could increase our GDP by about 10% a year if we were able to close the racial gaps and solve for the inequalities that are burdening communities across this country. To help us think about this opportunity, I'm honored to introduce Michael Smith, who's the Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director of Cabinet Affairs for My Brother's Keeper at the White House.
There's a group of young people in this country that we call disconnected youth or opportunity youth. 6.7 million young people between the ages of 14 to 24 that are not in school and not working. The vast majority of those kids happen to be boys and young men of color. We simply cannot continue to be globally competitive of the United States of America if we continue to write off this whole population of people. I'll also say the President's Council on Economic Advisors put out a report just a couple months ago this summer that showed two things. One, if you were a little black boy born 25 years ago, you have a 1 in 2 chance of being employed today. And the reason that is, it's either early death, incarceration, or other disparities that are keeping you out of the labor force. That report also showed if we could erase that gap in unemployment between young men of color and their counterparts, we could increase GDP by 2%. So this isn't a small, nice, heart-tugging issue. This is incredibly important for the future success of the United States of America.
Linda Rodriguez, Executive Director for the Fellowship Initiative at the J.P. Morgan Chase Foundation.
You know, we see this as part of our economic opportunity worth beyond just focusing on young men of color, but as part of a broader kind of strand or part of our thinking related to how do we increase opportunity across neighborhoods and really around the world. We know that other businesses are saying that there are jobs that remain unfilled, right, because people don't have the skills necessarily to fill them. And we know that across the country there are young men of color who are unable to access those resources because there is a mismatch. And so part of our thinking and the work that we've been doing is focusing on how we can increase opportunity for boys and young men of color, both within our signature initiative, the Fellowship Initiative, and also more broadly across our philanthropic investments. We know that this work is important for the whole country's future.
Kelly Denson, Director of Education and Policy Affairs for Discovery Communications.
We're a media company, and people know us as a media company. We have a strong brand. We have a great reach. Why not change the narrative and change the perception of boys and men of color using the power of our brand? And what we did was we started thinking, let's do a show, and let's do a show that's inspirational in nature. Oftentimes the media perpetuates stereotypes of either young black men or Hispanic men or tribal nations as very negative, and we wanted to be true to the story of what was happening, the challenges that all these folks were facing in this film, but at the same time give an inspirational ending to all of it. And basically it chronicles the lives of several different young boys and men of color across 4 different programs across the country: Chicago, New York, Chicago, Baltimore, and Marysville, California.
And Gbenga Akinnagbe, actor, activist, producer.
Change comes from the bottom up. And what excites me about this program is that it's doing just that by working with young boys and young boys of color and letting them know that, one, they're important, that they matter, but also that they can make the change that they want to see. Using the varying outlets that are now available, and you see young people doing it all the time. They're creating things to get their messages out there. They're creating music. They're creating art. Some of it seems so strange to us as we become older and become a different thing than the young people we used to be. But it's them wanting to be heard, encouraging that, giving them tools to do that at younger and younger ages. I think that's a significant way in moving forward.
Michael Blake, Assemblyman of the 79th District in the Bronx.
The U.S. Census has indicated that my assembly district in the Bronx has an 89.7% likelihood that any two people at random will be of a different ethnicity or ethnic background. So we don't come at this from a social case. There's an economic case why we need this to work. There's a everyday reality on the ground that my brother's keeper in the South Bronx is not a phrase. We need it to survive. Because what we have seen is not working is insufficient funding as it relates to education, insufficient opportunity as it relates to academic and employment opportunities, and a career and criminal injustice system that's actually making sure that more of our people go back into the system rather than transitioning out. So how do we make that transition? We've been able to do it in a few particular ways. We partnered with an organization called TechFin, Technology for Families in Need, provided 23 tablets for young people and 100 desktops for senior citizens. We identified an initiative called Workshops and Business Opportunities, 16 weeks of entrepreneurial training for 20 entrepreneurs throughout the particular district, regardless of their background. We partner up with Education Reform now to determine how do we provide support and advocacy so that you can support public schools, charter schools, private schools, and Catholic schools all at the same time. And what we need for those that are in the public sector, private sector, and not-for-profit sector to be thinking about is this cannot just be about a social good exercise. If you want to have an opportunity to do this, you have to match passion with commitment. That's what leads to transformation.
How can MBK, the initiative, and MBK Alliance really be much more catalytic in trying to move this issue from the margins into the mainstream?
You know, there's a great African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And My Brother's Keeper, the president would say, is not some big new government program, but it's really a call to action and an all-hands-on-deck moment. And so when the president created My Brother's Keeper, you know, it was calling federal policymakers to action and creating a federal cabinet-level task force that's working on policy interventions. And it was calling the private sector to action. And since the launch of My Brother's Keeper, there's been more than $500 million committed to be invested. And we're seeing in real ways all across the country through public-private partnerships how, you know, we're better together and we're doing better work when we're all willing to step up.
For us, you know, we think about this as what can we offer, right? Where can we add value? We don't necessarily just want to say, we'll write a check. We want to leverage our internal resources to support the work. And I think that is one of the critical lessons for businesses and nonprofits that are thinking about how do we build collaboratives to increase services and really have sustainable change over time. And so for us, two examples would be through the Fellowship Initiative, where we have over 120 of our employees serving as mentors for 3 or more years. And more recently, we've started working with an organization that is looking at building the capacity of nonprofits serving African Americans across the country. And so for us, we thought we'll fund them, but we'll also leverage our internal resources to build teams of TA providers or consultants that work with those organizations.
We have a vision for our district that we call 321. 3 stands for the 3 E's of economic development, education, and equality for all. 2 for the 2 paths and how we get there, strengthen minority women-owned business enterprises, and having a career-oriented education to go from the cradle to the career, with the one goal of how do you transform the South Bronx to make it the urban metropolis of the world. And so we made a determination of how do we have concrete policies to match that vision. First, we thought about education. We have 10 of our schools that were determined as struggling schools, meaning that they had the bottom 5% throughout the last 3 years. So let's find more additional resources for those schools. But on top of that, let's partner up those schools with career mentors, which is what they're consistently asking for. We have to address criminal justice. So we've been very clear in twofold. One, as it relates to raise the age, because New York is one of 2 states in this country where 16 and 17-year-olds are tried in criminal court as adults, North Carolina being the other. And on a special prosecutor so that the communities can feel trust again throughout the collective process. Why is that relevant to this collective exercise? If I feel like I have a chance to succeed in school, I have a chance to get a job, and I have a chance to turn my life around if I make a mistake, then I really truly feel that you are my brother's keeper.
We have a lot of the answers, but we need policy to kind of help those answers come to fruition. I look at the folks in the film and programs like Youth Build that marry the opportunity to get a high school diploma and also teach you work skills and teach you how to build a home, and then you come out with a feeling of confidence and you come out with a whole new set of skills. So I think programs like Becoming a Man and Youth Build, if we could provide more funding for programs like that focus on work skills, cognitive development, emotional skills, and provide a support system for these folks, I think that's really the critical thing, and I feel like that's kind of some of the things that everybody's pretty much saying on this panel.
The president likes to say America's at its strongest when we're fielding a full team. And so you can't just sit here and look for folks on this stage or look for policymakers to do it. If you're a business owner, ask yourself about your employment practices. Are you supporting easy reentry and giving people a second chance? Small business owners can do apprenticeships. Are you an organization or an academic and creating internship opportunities? Are you yourself becoming a mentor or supporting mentoring organizations? Are you advocating and thinking about local policy? I would encourage folks, no matter who you are, what sector you're in, to really think about how I could make a difference for some of the challenges that boys and young men of color are facing.
Tangibly, any and all programs that you have in your companies where you have workshops, workforce opportunities, trainings, internships, et cetera, our office wants to partner with you for that so that our young people can get those opportunities.
The vision of what we have for this country and how we relate to one another in the public space influences who we become and who our youth becomes. I would encourage people to really look at ourselves and think about what are we willing to really sacrifice to make that kind of sustainable change.
Figure out where the gap is, and then figure out what you do well, and deliver on that. So that's from a corporate and organizational perspective. From a personal perspective, and this is going to sound very kumbaya, find one young person and just talk to them, listen to them, encourage them, instill confidence, because even the most confident young person still feels insecure. So do that, because you don't realize that you're grooming a leader when you do that. And when you groom a leader, that's where the change comes about.
It's important to have diverse voices in this, that this issue doesn't exist on the margins, that we all understand that this is central to the country's future. And so from wherever you live in this space, reach out and find other people who can support the work.
Thank you very much.